So we had a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit of time this afternoon, and it occurred to me that I could ask Representative Supernaut to introduce a bill on short notice, and she probably wouldn't object too strongly. So we're going to hear from her. And then, as it happened, Michael Grady was also available for the next short while. So after we hear from the sponsor of the bill, lead sponsor, I think maybe some other folks in the room co-sponsored it.
Yes, Esme and Josie.
Okay. We'll hear from you. Not too late. So we'll hear from you, and then as we've done other bills, then we'll have legal counsel go through, legislative counsel go through line by line. We haven't talked at all about what might happen after this today, so that we can spend a little time as a committee if there are reactions and thoughts on where we might want to go with it.
Great.
That's all we have scheduled for this afternoon. And we've got more bill introductions coming tomorrow morning. I think we're starting the day at 9. Okay, maybe not starting right at 9. We'll stay tuned as far as that goes, but we'll be having some more bill introductions tomorrow, and then some testimony later in the week on Representative Pearl's bill, the Ag and Nutrition and Education, on Thursday morning at this point. So with that, Heather.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This is H368, and I'll just read the statement of purpose. This bill proposes to amend the powers and duties of the Vermont Working Lands Enterprise Board to require the board to provide financial and technical assistance for new farmers, veteran farmers, and disadvantaged farmers in order to increase opportunities for more persons entering farming in the state. And so before we dive into the details of the bill, I just want to set the scene on why we decided this bill was something that was really worth pursuing. And I also have to thank Mike for working tirelessly with me. We worked on about 6 different drafts, and I still think that there's a lot of development that needs to happen on this one. But as it stands, according to the American Farmland Trust, the average age of a Vermont farmer is 57 years old, and farmers at or above retirement age manage 30% of all land in production. And the Intervale Center, which provides business support to farmers, has over the past few years seen a substantial increase in demand for specific land access and technical assistance for farmers. The Young Farmers Coalition has identified land access and access to capital as the primary barriers to entering the agricultural sector. And this could mean moving from rented land to land of their own, co-locating on a property with other types of enterprises, buying land, and starting a farm business concurrently, or entering into long-term leases. So people want to farm. Vermont is one of the few states where actually the number of farms is growing and not decreasing. It's not to say that dairy isn't decreasing, but the number of farms is actually increasing. So folks want to get into it, but they're struggling to find that land, and they're struggling to enter and have capital. So that is the reason why we decided to create this bill. And originally it wasn't housed within the Working Lands Enterprise Board, which it is now. And that was due to struggling to really define who are our disadvantaged farmers. And the definition that we decided upon is that a disadvantaged farmer is somebody who makes below the state median income, that being $69,000. Our original intent with this bill was to focus on new farmers, veteran farmers, and BIPOC farmers, vulnerable populations, marginalized folks, but we were running up against constitutionality issues and trying to figure out how can we incorporate that language to ensure that those folks who are really struggling with access are getting the support that we are trying to set out in this bill. So still looking for creative ways to drive home who it is that we're trying to target in here. And the reason why we landed on the Working Lands Board is because they already have the power to establish an application process, eligibility criteria, and criteria for prioritizing assistance for awarding grants, loans, and incentives, and other investments in agricultural and forestry enterprises. So they already have this structure that's really set in place that would allow them to easily figure out, perhaps not easily, but figure out ways in which they could support this new class of farmers that we are defining. They also have the power already in their authority to gain information through the use of experts, consultants, and data to perform analysis as needed to request services from state economists, state administrative agencies, state programs, and other planning entities. So they already have those powers to work with additional folks who could really help figure out what these barriers are and ways to effectively tackle them. I think what this bill doesn't do, and what I am still really thinking could use some substantial development, is it doesn't set a framework around how Working Lands should go about assisting new farmers. It very much leaves it up to the board. It does not have an appropriation, and I think that if we are going to be tasking folks to really develop something that could be helpful, it should have an appropriation. It doesn't require the investment in succession planning programs, which are critical for transitions for farms. It doesn't reduce competition from non-agricultural buyers or out-of-state buyers. It doesn't improve access to credit through farm service agencies. It doesn't address farmer housing, and it doesn't fund the current land link programs that already exist within the state. So what it does is increase financial and technical assistance for new farmers, veteran farmers, and disadvantaged farmers in order to expand opportunities for more persons entering farming in the state. But it doesn't designate how we'll do that. And it works to encourage and assist new farmers, veteran farmers, and farmers who are disadvantaged in the ownership and operation of farms in the state. And then we go on to define what a farmer who is disadvantaged is, a new farmer, and a veteran farmer. And that is it. So it is a very simple bill that only works to amend the powers of the Working Lands Enterprise Board, but it doesn't concretely shift anything other than inserting that you now have the obligation to help this class of farmers access capital and land. So that is H through 68.
Dave, you had your hand up and then.
I'm curious, do we know what percentage of existing Vermont farmers falls into this under
69,000?
69,000 farmers?
Oh, sorry, I thought.
No. Oh, yeah, the 69,000, like, so what percentage of farmers make that amount or less?
So we could get that likely from the agency.
Yeah,
they would have to break it down. I know that they regulate the sales for produce farms, vegetable farms. I don't know how they regulate dairy when it comes to that, and because it's, they have different definitions for what it means to be a small farm, a medium farm, and a large farm, and I don't know if they include the annual sales of that portion. So there's split sectors on how they determine that.
Oh, even how we count the numbers, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess they would likely have to submit tax forms in order to prove and demonstrate that they are below that income thresholds.
I mean, my only concern is that probably is like over 90% of farmers.
Yeah.
Was that the intention, was to get that wide of a net?
No. Looking at you. Oh, Grady, I could use some help.
So how to quantify income is difficult right now because the agency actually doesn't always request income information. With that said, USDA does an annual well, it's not annual, it's like every 5 years, an annual assessment of farms and the percentage and amount of sales from farms. And so there are approximately 1,000 farms in the state that have sales that exceed $100,000. And all of the remaining farms, which is around 4,000 to 5,000 farms, have less than 99,000. So there is and that's just sales. That's not necessarily income. And so that's true. A substantial amount of farms would probably fall under the 67 to 69, but it's also a sliding scale because it's medium income by household. So a 4-person household medium income, and I probably don't have the right number. I think in 2022 it was about $104,000. No, $117,000. So some farms wouldn't qualify because they would, because of the size of their household, might not have that 67 to 69 median income.
Rodney had a question, and then Mike.
Question got answered for now.
Okay. Mike Rice.
Yeah. Mike, I know that USDA uses, for a lot of its grant funding, the term socially disadvantaged. I'm wondering what stops us from using that term here?
So in ARPA in 2021, there were a couple of different programs that were set up. One was debt relief for Black farmers. One was a socially disadvantaged program. There was a significant amount of litigation initiated against both of those programs. Ultimately, because of the way that the decisions were trending, the USDA and the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022 repealed the debt relief for Black farmers and amended the socially disadvantaged program. I thought I was using the term from the new socially disadvantaged program. I can double check that. It's 7 USC 2279. Hold on a second.
We would like to expand upon that.
You're right, Representative Rice. They do still use the term socially disadvantaged. But the issue with that definition is that it's a group whose members have been subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice because of their identity as members of a group without regard to their individual qualities. And so, again, it's a race-based standard. And I'm going to read to you. It's a case out of Jacksonville, Florida. It was a white farmer that challenged both of these programs, and the court said that strict scrutiny was required, and that's the highest level of analysis that a court will use in a constitutional equal protection claim. And the court said that the state does have a compelling interest that remedying prior discriminatory actions, history of discrimination, is a compelling state interest. Then they said it wasn't narrowly tailored enough, that it applied strictly on racial grounds, irrespective of any other factor. Every person who identifies him or herself as falling within a socially disadvantaged group as a qualifying farm receives up to 120% debt relief, and no one else receives any debt relief. Although the government argues that the section is narrowly tailored to reach small farmers or farmers on the brink of foreclosure, it is not. Regardless of farm size, socially disadvantaged farmer receives up to 120% debt relief, and regardless of whether a socially disadvantaged farmer is having the most profitable year ever and not remotely in danger of foreclosure. This bill isn't really narrowly tailored at all, because you're leaving many of the decisions to WELAB as to criteria. And I would think you'd have a similar analysis by a court. I think the court would find it's a compelling state interest, but it's not narrowly tailored enough to have a race-based criteria.
So if the bill was more narrowly tailored, then that socially disadvantaged language would be more acceptable in your.
Yes, but getting to that destination might be your hard part, because the courts have said if you're going to have a race-based standard and you're going to show that it's narrowly tailored, you need to have a history of documentation of the discrimination. And the federal government, who's been trying to remedy in one form or another, and depending on how successful you think they are, discrimination in USDA programs since what's called the Pigford case, they haven't been able to demonstrate with enough clarity the history of discrimination. I don't think Vermont could even approximate what the USDA has done, because Vermont doesn't collect or hasn't historically collected information regarding your ethnicity or your identifying racial characteristics.
So
I don't know how that they would prove that.
Well, I guess sort of what you're saying.
you're next.
Sorry. You pointed at me. Did you not? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Sorry.
I was going to ask before, because several people have their hands up. So just would it be helpful to have Mike walk through the bill before we dig in? Or I don't want to break the train of thought here either. So Josie, your choice.
I guess my only thing is, in last year, S226, they used a definition, historically marginalized or disadvantaged community. It means a community that has historically suffered from discrimination, doesn't say what kind, and has not had equal access to public or private economic benefits due to race, ethnicity, gender, geography, language preference, immigration or citizen status, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, or disability status of its members. It feels like we've got a little wiggle room in there because it's historically marginalized or disadvantaged community. I just feel like, and this got passed. This was what created the Land Access Opportunity Board. So I don't see why we can't emulate that for this. And I'm not sure why we keep butting up against sort of the constitutionality of it when it worked last year and the board is doing well and they've been charged with a mission and they seem like they're fulfilling it. So I'm just frustrated that we can't just use this language. And we're using a financial one instead.
Has that board actually awarded anything?
Question.
It's a good question. They just got 1.2 million to get rolling, so I suspect that'll start happening.
Right. The issue will arise when they start making the awards. Just as the issue arose under the ARPA funds when the eligibility opened. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying that if you do it, there's constitutional issues And there were constitutional issues that were raised with the Environmental Justice Bill, the Land Access Board bill last year. You could do it. I'm just exercising my job of advising you on potential legal issues with doing that.
Mike, just to be clear, the ARPA bills that you're referring to, those were here in Vermont.
No, that was a USDA federal program.
Okay.
There were approximately 20 litigations initiated. Some of them were consolidated, but there were multiple claims of violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And then USDA repealed it because of those claims.
Okay. Let's keep going then, Dave.
Mike O'Grady, shy of trying to disproportionately serve underserved communities, is there a way we can avoid the unconstitutionality of that and at least assure that a proportionate number of community members are served? Meaning, for example, if Vermont is 2% Native American, can we, make sure that at least 2% of a program applies to that demographic?
You can do what you want, but you're not going to avoid the strict scrutiny test. So this is a case, I'm going to quote from a case from about 2004, where it was looking at racial classifications and what standard to apply for any program that was based on racial classification. So the U.S. Supreme Court, we hold today that all racial classifications imposed by whatever federal, state, or local governmental actor must be analyzed by a reviewing court under strict scrutiny. In other words, such classifications are constitutional only if they are narrowly tailored measures that further compelling governmental interest. That is the standard that you were working on when you were going to be using racial classification as an eligibility criteria. So you have a compelling state interest, as the court in Jacksonville said, that remedying prior historic discrimination, but you have to narrowly tailor it to that discrimination. And I don't know how you do that in Vermont.
Just money.
Sean, and then
Just what you're trying to do.
Carry on, John.
Not to throw you into a tantrum, but so. All right, I'm just wondering about these definitions because, like, I think I know what you're trying to do, but does working lands, the WeLab board at the moment provide financial and technical assistance to the groups outside this or for farming?
Yes,
They do.
yes.
So if I'm a Black Vermont farmer my farm makes $80,000 a year, I already have access to this. WeLab already cuts off people if they're making less than this, they won't provide assistance.
No, are you asking if WeLab
Because you're
specifically looks to already help those folks who I've labeled as
saying
the ones?
this bill would require
It
them.
requires them to do this.
Right.
And there's nothing in the duties and powers that currently exist in WeLab that requires them to do this for these specific classes that we have identified.
But they are required to do it for farmers making above 69,000.
For agriculture and forestry folks. And that is the definition, it's just ag and forestry individuals. It does not specify who within those sectors. And clearly there are equity issues that exist.
But they could potentially be doing it for these groups already.
They could potentially be doing it, but I think that perhaps we would see more folks entering into the field of farming and not being able to access land and capital with ease if they were. And they're not the only ones, right? Like there are other organizations who equally work to get these classes of farmers into this field. But there's nothing specifically in their powers that says they have to prioritize this group. And this
These
is,
should be prioritized.
yes.
Because like all the three different categories, like new farmer, besides like you haven't been farming, what makes you a new farmer? Do you have to make potentially more than 69,000? Can I get into crocuses and make 5,000 for 3 years in a row or 10 years in a row, and they would help me?
That does not make you a new farmer. A new farmer is somebody.
Well, let's say I haven't farmed,
Okay,
No.
then you're a new farmer.
right? Even if
Right.
I don't make really anything farming,
Right. You're still a new farmer.
okay? Or I'm a veteran, say, who already is farming and doing well. Same thing, I'm not a priority.
As it stands in this,
Yes.
there's no language currently in their powers and duties that would make them a priority.
Right, because this is essentially for new veteran farmers,
Correct.
Yeah.
veterans who have not been farming.
Exactly. Yes.
And as far as the sort of marginalized people, communities named in the Land Access and Opportunity Board, if they have been farming or they're successful farming or they have been veterans and farming, they're not priorities.
There's nothing that says anything about marginalized or BIPOC farmers being prioritized in this.
Josie, why don't you ask your question and then we'll have Mike walk us through. And Mike,
Well, Mike-
you have a link, Mike, so you can put it up and share the language.
I can, I just need sharing access.
We'll give you that while Josie's asking her question.
Well, I guess my question is, I'm looking at the HUD site and it says there are protected classes of people and it's race, color, national origin, religion, sex, including gender identity and sexual orientation, familial status and disability. So can we not use a definition like that? If the HUD, which is a national organization or program for like, I don't understand why we can't, if HUD can do it, why can't we?
So you are dealing with a two-way street. So HUD and all the protected classes that are identified there are identified so that they are not discriminated against in housing, either by landlords or by housing authorities, etc. That they have their rights protected so that they are not discriminated against in housing. The two-way street is that when you have a program that's going to use as its criteria primarily a race-based classification to the exclusion of other persons, you are discriminating based on race. And it's a two-way street. So there's HUD protections and other equal protections based on race to protect discrimination of those classes. But you cannot also discriminate in favor of those classes to the exclusion of other racial classifications.
What if we kept that definition and the financial one? Would that be a nice sort of elegant loophole?
Which definition? The HUD definition?
I'm just trying to figure out how we can actually address the marginalized folks who generally do not have access to this, not get caught up in now we're racially discriminating the other way, and keep the financial threshold there to allow for.
So financial thresholds are not race-based. Financial thresholds are allowable. They don't discriminate.
What if this were female farmers, would that still be considered discriminating against male farmers?
The it's possible, you know, the cases I have in front of me right now are about racial classifications, but I could do more research into other protected classes.
All right.
Can I ask a follow-up on this?
Sure.
So Mike, for example, the Abenakis have no farmland in the whole state. They don't own any farmland in the whole state. So would you use something like that to show that there must be discrimination there and thus they have been discriminated against?
I think that's the type of thing that you would need to show in both your compelling interest and how you are going to narrowly tailor the program. I think having that kind of evidence, data, is one of the things that courts have said is allowable. Because, you know, people will tell you that strict scrutiny means that you're going to fail, but the courts have said, no, you just need to meet the level of analysis. You just need to show the proof of compelling and narrowly tailored. That's not easy, but it's not impossible. If you had a record showing historic discrimination and a way to narrowly tailor a program to address that, I think it would work. But I don't know if you have that information in Vermont. I don't think there is anything beyond anecdotal and probably intuitive evidence that there has been discrimination. Because that data is not collected.
You're not allowed to collect it.
You can collect the data. There's nothing against a requirement to collect data, right? And you could put on every form that the agency issues a request to identify your ethnicity or racial classification. Then you could start to build data.
Okay, Mike, if you want to share your screen, if you've got the bill in front of you, why don't you just walk us through the language? And this has been a good warm-up to looking at the actual text.
All right, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So as Representative Supernaut said, this is a bill that would provide, it would amend the Working Lands Enterprise Board's duties and powers to require financial and technical assistance for new farmers, veteran farmers, and disadvantaged farmers. You'll see there's a lot of non-underlined language here because I want to show you some of the duties and powers of WLEB. They already have a duty to identify opportunities and challenges related to access to capital, infrastructure, product development, marketing, training, research, and education. What would be added to their duties would be increasing financial and technical assistance for new farmers, veteran farmers, and disadvantaged farmers in order to expand opportunities for more persons to enter farming in the state. Then you move down to their powers, and they get to design and conduct their public engagement process. They get to establish in subdivision 6 an application process, eligibility criteria, and criteria for prioritizing assistance for rewarding grants, loans, incentives, and other investments. So they already have basically the public participation, application, eligibility criteria, prioritization authority. There's very little detail on how they are supposed to implement any of that, but they do, and they do go through a process And they do have resources available on the agency's website to instruct people how to apply, what the criteria will be, etc. But what this bill would do would, under the duties, powers, would be to encourage and assist new farmers, veteran farmers, and farmers who are disadvantaged in the ownership and operation of farms in the state. So the board would have authority to set the criteria, application, etc. WeLab does use matches, but you can also apply for a waiver of the match requirement. And there's no guarantee that they have to use, or no requirement that they have to use a match. They just use a match to try to spread the money as far as it would go. So if this bill was enacted, it would be drawing on that same pot of money that was just appropriated in your appropriations bill, which I believe, after all was said and done, was $1 million going to WeLab. Then you get to the definitions. Farmer who is disadvantaged, and it could be a farmer who is socially disadvantaged or economically disadvantaged. The person engaged in farming or proposing to engage in farming who is annually earning not more than the state median income level for the relevant household size. As Representative Supranat indicated, that's between 67 and 69 for a single person household, and going up to about 117 for a 4-person household. That data is drawn from Census Bureau data, and it can shift and it can look a little different depending on who's reporting it, but it's generally in that category. A new farmer is a person who has not previously operated a farm in Vermont for more than 3 years in the previous 10 calendar years. Similarly, a veteran farmer means a person who served in the U.S. Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, or Coast Guard, including the Reserve, who was discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable, and who has not previously operated a farm for more than 3 years in the previous 10 calendar years. So, as Representative O'Brien noted, it really is a new veteran farmer. And then the act shall take effect on July 1, 2023. And that is the bill.
So we could put Representative Supranat back in the witness chair and have her take our questions as well. But any questions for Mike on the language? So just to that last point one more time, is the definition of veteran farmer essentially identical to the definition of new farmer? Except for, in terms of their history with farming?
In terms of their history, yes. As Representative Rice noted, there are programs at the USDA level for these types of applicants. There is a veteran farmer program. In the federal program, they just say that the farm or ranch, the applicant cannot have been farming or ranching for more than 10 years. So it takes away the new aspect of it, the 3 in the last 10, and just says you can't have been farming or ranching for more than 10 years.
John.
So Mike, on new farmers, how would the agency sort of give somebody that status? Like, I'm not a farmer, but I have an idea to tap 1 million maple trees, or I have an idea to, essentially have a household garden. Does your proposal, if it was granting or technical assistance, whatever, does it have to rise to sort of those RAP levels or the IRS level of income?
Well, so most people who are farming have to file out that special form for farming income. So if you filed that form in 3 of the last 10 years, I think that would be the question that the WeLab would put to an applicant. In addition, you're supposed to, if you're a certified small farm, annually certify. And so the agency would have that information available to them. If you've annually certified 3 of the last 10 years, you wouldn't, or more than 3 of the last 10 years, you wouldn't qualify. And then if you are shipping milk, then you need an annual inspection. So they'd be able to look at their inspection records. And if you are a produce company that's going to sell under the FSMA rules, you need some identification to the agency. It may be that those produce farms never exceed the FSMA eligibility requirements, and are then operating without compliance with FSMA, which is a good thing regulatorily.
Yeah, I guess I'm just confused on, it's almost 2 categories of, say you all of a sudden were hot to grow carrots, acres and acres of carrots, but have never done agriculture before, versus you who is doing this in the process of it. Like 1 year in, you've decided, oh wow, I've made a lot of mistakes, I could use technical assistance. Those almost seem like 2 categories.
I mean, they're both new farmers. If
Right.
the carrot farmer has only been doing it for a year or has never done it, they'd both be new farmers.
So I guess if I just want to be a farmer, I'm a new farmer. I don't even have to get my hands in the soil. I just have an idea about, I have a plan to farm.
Yeah, I think that. So again, the feds have a similar term. They call it a beginning farmer. And it's similar criteria. You've not operated a farm or a ranch in the previous 10 years. So this is actually a little bit more flexible in giving you the opportunity to have operated 3 of the previous 10 calendar years.
Okay, I get it.
Representative Levitt.
Well, I'm going to just keep hammering this point home for a second. I'm on the USDA site and they had said women farmers and ranchers. The USDA Farm Service Agency targets a portion of all of its loan funds to historically underserved farmers and ranchers, including women. Why can't we do that?
You can. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying that there are issues that are involved and that you need to draft it in a way so that it's got a compelling interest and it's narrowly tailored. USDA has data on potential.
It's all just based on, all right.
Heather?
Yes, could I recenter us for just one moment and just restate that what this idea is trying to accomplish is to help folks who are wanting to enter into the field of agriculture, who likely have already been within the field of agriculture in one form or another. That is what is making them want to enter into the field of agriculture, but who has struggled in the ownership and the operation of a farm in general. So I want to be clear that Vermont is going to be struggling with a loss of farmers because they're aging out. And we need to be prepared in ways to help those folks who are trying to transition into that ownership, who have been historically left out of those conversations because, one, they don't have the capital to access that land or the capital to purchase a tractor or to even qualify for an agricultural loan. This is starting the conversation and trying to determine how can we bridge those gaps so we can make that transition the smoothest as possible, with the acknowledgement that there are folks who have been left out of the agricultural conversation historically speaking, and how can we bring them in on a level playing field in order to make up for what is going to be a substantial loss in agricultural workforce. And that is what is the heart of this bill. Carry on.
Senator Graham.
So if this was to pass, working lands would have to be obligated to find and purchase the land, or just fund the purchase of land.
Neither. It doesn't require them to do any of that. It just says to encourage and assist,
So,
but it does not task them with purchasing land. It doesn't invest in any of the existing land link opportunities, say the land trust or any other farm link program that helps connect farmers with land available. It doesn't have that portion of it.
how do you plan on new farmers purchasing land if there's not any money?
Yeah, I want there to be an appropriation in here, but it just didn't happen yet. I think that there needs to be funding somehow. I also don't think that this has to live in working lands. This was just something that was already established and it curtailed well. But there will need to be funding, right? Like that's just the way it is.
It's similar to land trust without the compensation restrictions.
You're saying it would be like the land trust, but without the restrictions? Yeah, what restrictions do you?
They can't develop it.
Right, but also we're not looking to have any of the land for development in this either. Is that what
Land trusts, even though they're really slow,
right?
you know, when they purchase the rights. Then if the farmer decides to sell that land, it has to be sold at ag value.
Right.
So that's how a lot of these farms, new farmers get into this. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what the difference is between what you're trying to do and what already exists.
Right. And I think what we're trying to demonstrate is that even selling those properties at ag value, they're still out of reach for a lot of these classes that we're trying to include in this. Those are still extremely expensive.
So then you're still gonna have to develop a program to provide financial assistance.
Right. And I had mentioned that what this bill doesn't do is help to improve access to credit through farm service agencies. So it doesn't have that financial component that isn't within the powers of the Working Lands Enterprise Board, which in my opinion means that this could perhaps be extracted out of working lands and this could be an entirely new bill, right? I am not opposed to that in any way, shape, or form. This was just the option to avoid the constitutionality issues that were arising when I was trying to figure out ways to bring these classes of farmers into the conversation and figure out how to help them transition onto farms that were already in existence and likely going to go out of agriculture, and not have those properties be at the risk of being purchased by an out-of-state buyer, being purchased by a non-agricultural individual. And this was what was developed.
So I get one last point.
Yeah.
Is being one of those aging farmers that's over 57 years old. That when you're ready to sell, I mean, the only thing you have is equity in your land.
Right.
Can't just give it away. Can't just reduce the price down to a few pennies on a dollar, because that's what you're gonna live on the rest of your, if you're lucky, 40 years, 30 years. So, I mean, you gotta look at that side of it too. I mean, you know, so you're gonna have some financial help in trying to accomplish what you want to do.
And that is certainly the side that we did look at, is that we don't want to lower that agricultural value in any way for the farmer who had previously been farming that land. We want to make sure that the individual who is looking to purchase that land has access to the capital, has access to those lines of credit without the additional barriers that already exist for them when they're trying to access that. I can't tell you how many farmers who are in my age bracket of their early 30s who have looked to get substantial loans to purchase a farm, and we are just flat out denied despite farming for 10 years. And
Well, lenders don't understand farming.
right, we are a risk.
Well, it's because traditional banks use a whole different set of criteria than farmers can do.
Right. And nothing, let me just say, nothing in this bill addresses that in any way, shape, or form. I do think that it needs to be addressed, but this is just the starting conversation to acknowledge that there are folks who are looking to enter into this sector who do not have the ability to enter into it now because of those barriers that exist with land and capital. And the bill only says that the Working Lands Enterprise Board needs to help them acquire those.
So to that point about land that's already been conserved, this could apply to a purchase for a new farmer who's trying to buy land that's already been conserved. So it's already selling at the ag value because of that, but the new farmer still can't afford it. This could help the new farmer.
Yes, it could help the new farmer, but it doesn't state how it will help the new farmer, right? It just says that it's going to use existing tools that are already within the powers of the Working Lands Enterprise Board to assist and encourage new farmers in the ownership of farms. But it doesn't state how it'll go about doing that. It does, however, state that Working Lands has the ability to ask experts and folks in the field and rely on other statistics in order to really figure out how to best move forward with that. But it's, yeah.
Okay, we've got Mike just for another 5 minutes, I think, and then he needs to move on to his next thing. So while we still have him, any other questions?
No.
John?
Maybe Mike would know. Mike, is there any sort of state-run economic development bank that essentially acts as the intermediary between U.S., say, federal programs and individual buyers? So I'm thinking, like, if there was an ag bank, essentially like the land trust, but at state government, who, because farmers don't have very good credit, right, especially this described farmers, if Vermont essentially is buying Rodney's farm and then figures out terms to sell it to individuals because commercial banks don't want to take that risk, are there?
VHCB does that.
Yeah.
VHCB works with numerous partners to try to find land and to try to find the financing for new farmers. They'll work with the land trust. They'll work with whomever they can. Like just as an example, about all the different partners that can be involved. Most of you probably don't remember Representative Bill Johnson. He owned the farm up in Keenan. It was on the Connecticut River. I've fished up there. It literally was a beautiful farm. But he had a bunch of environmentally sensitive areas on the farm. So what the ATB did with the land trust is that they worked with the Nature Conservancy. Nature Conservancy bought some of the environmentally sensitive areas. The land trust donated money, VHCB donated money. I think there was maybe another association involved as well, in order to give these new farmers, this couple, enough income to pay Representative Johnson's asking price. And they did it. I mean, it took some time, but it happened. So they're an entity that gets state money. It's not necessarily bank money, to help people acquire farmland. And they're creative about it.
One other thing was, I know there's that $2,000 cap. What's that under? Is that under the? I mean, that you have to make more than 2,000.
That's the small farm. It's the RAPs. It's not necessarily small farm. You need to make $2,000 on annually on, depending on the language, 4 acres or 10 acres or more.
Because it seems almost like the economic decisions could be made more on sort of the seriousness of the farming. So if in 10 years you could show you've made commercially 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, whatever we decide, sort of fits the time period we're in. And you don't have to worry about if you have a partner who's making money and doing something else, or you have a job off the farm. It seems like there's just a certain commitment to farming that could be the litmus test for new farmers or.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
right. That's viable.
Commitment to farming,
You're committed.
10 years in. Yeah.
Okay. Mike, thank you for. joining us.
I
Yeah.
just want to Representative Levitt's point about how USDA is running a program that provides assistance to women and some disadvantaged. I just did some research on that. That was resolution of discrimination claims brought by women. It basically, instead of going to litigation, they set up a program and the applicant has to show discrimination. So
Okay.
it's data-based again.
So you have to prove harm in some way.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That's true.
And there's a whole claims process for how to do that.
So would that be similar if I'm a single mom with kids and I'm being denied housing? Is that the same sort of thing? Like that it can become a protected class if you can show you're denied or there are enough data?
Yeah, right. I think that's a possibility, and kind of highlight that you've demonstrated you've been discriminated against because of your gender or your family class, versus the ARPA program to provide assistance to Black farmers, where every one of those cases starts off with every one of the litigations filed, regardless of whether or not you're doing well as a farmer, you get 120% preference for financing. And like that's, do you see the difference? You show discrimination, you can prove discrimination, versus a program which gives a preference solely based on your race or ethnic class. So that's kind of what the data or the evidence that you can show about discrimination versus just providing a preference solely based on your protected class. That's the concern I have. And that's the concern that multiple courts looked at when they were looking at the ARPA program. And so I just want to I'm advising you that if you're going to do something, based on protected class, that you want to do it carefully. You want to do it in a way that's based on documented data. And I still think that there might be some issues, especially in Vermont, where there isn't a lot of data on some of these classes. And I got to tell you, I'm the gray-haired, red-faced white man, and so I get kind of, I'm trying to navigate this as carefully as I can, and please tell me if I'm offending anyone, but I'm trying to just give you what I see as the legal analysis that's out there on these issues. And I hope I am not offending anyone.
Here in the room, I haven't noted anything close to that, Mike. So thank you for raising that, though. And I know we had heard that you did need to leave at 3, so I don't want to keep you any longer if you need to.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for helping us out today.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
But
So you can stay there or you can move that. Anybody want to, yeah, we can keep talking about this while we're here. Don't have anything else we need to do. So sort of think about next steps. Did this help, Heather, at all from just talking to us about it? I know you've been having conversations with other people, but did anything become any clearer at all in your own?
I mean, no, not clear. So it's helpful, I think, to hear the perspectives on it. I think that I just want to reiterate what the problem is, and I am so open to the creative ways in which we can get to the solutions for that. That being access to land for folks farming and access to that capital that is clearly a barrier. So yeah, that's really it.
We have willing buyers, maybe, but they don't have the capital. They don't have the cash or the access to capital.
Yeah.
I think Josie and then Rodney and then Mike can.
Real quick, I just wonder if there isn't a way we can't get some data by just putting a call out there to whatever farm networks you all have and are part of, and talking to Land Access Opportunity Board and say, do you have data about how many people have tried to get a loan, have tried to buy a farm, and who's been denied? Because someone has data. We just don't have it. And we need to figure out who has it. And maybe it's the Agency of Ag and Food Markets, or I think we need to just start casting a really big net and saying, because we don't have, clearly it is all data driven. And if we can get some 100 people who tried to buy a farm, and if 80 of them were black and they were denied, but the 20 people who tried to buy were white and they were able to get a farm, maybe you can prove harm. At least we could start a conversation. And since I'm not a farmer, I have no idea what those networks are that you guys have, but I think it might be time to tap into them.
Mycelium Woods.
Rodney?
I just want to say I understand what you're trying to do. I think it's good. And I just don't think it's going to work through working lands. I think we should get somebody in from the compensation, housing and
BCB.
yeah, and also someone from like Beta or Yankee Credit that deal with farms and this type of thing. And even somebody from FSA to see what is actually out there now and what we can change to get where we want to get.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I was just going to throw out that I wonder if one sort of way around having to name protected classes would be to say, and this obviously becomes more relevant if we find a way to attach actual funding to it, right? If we're finding a way to actually link the people to the farmland, would be to say, in order to qualify, you have to be a person who's been employed by a farm for X number of years and has been denied access to, like, so you could come and say, I have worked on this person's farm I've been a farm worker for 10 years. I want to start my own farm. I went to the bank. I tried. They denied me. I'm the person who needs this help, right?
Right.
Interesting.
That's a,
Going back to what you were saying, maybe that's a whole nother bill to curate the data so that we can have informed decision-making based on this.
but I love what Mike just said.
Absolutely. Sorry to distract from that. That was brilliant too. But I mean, I'm just thinking,
Not a bad idea. I mean, they just had a bill go down for data for town offices, so people knew just the racial breakdown of just really who's running for office
right.
and the gender breakdown.
Somebody else have a hand up? John?
I mean, I'm frustrated by the sort of tax and financial sort of thresholds for who's a farmer and who's not at both the IRS level and at the state level. And I wish, a bill like this could redefine that, because I don't think it matches what's going on our farms or in our backyard homesteaders at all.
I agree.
So are you taking notes, Heather, at least in your head, on who we might want to reach out to?
Certainly,
Okay.
yes.
Here, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like there's a couple of different ways we could go here, and we can, I don't know whether you've already talked to Working Lands or whether it would be helpful at all to have a conversation with them, but it seems like maybe that's not the direction you want to.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't feel like the proper house for it.
Charles?
I would strongly encourage us to also reach out to a constitutional expert, because the Constitution is the law of the land. Can't go around it. I mean, me personally, I'd like to see anybody that needs help. Gender, color, means nothing. But I'd be willing to search in constitutionally. So something should work there. I mean, good luck.
But yeah, I mean, you might start by talking to Mike O'Grady, because I think he's got a pretty good handle on where the challenges have been recently.
He knows more than I do. Just joking.
You think maybe, looking through visa, I mean, I know they have a program where if you don't have collateral or enough collateral, they get a FSA guarantee. So that takes longer to get the loan, but they do have those types of things, and I've done it both ways before. Not to buy land.
Esme and then Charles.
I might come back to it later, I think.
Okay.
So you can pass on me.
All right, Charles.
Do you, in talking to Michael Grady, I'd like to do that, but do you do that in his office or over the phone or here?
You can email him. You can find if you go into your legislative email, his name will pop up if you put it in, and you can just reach out and ask him when he's available. Yeah.
If I may, on the FSA point, and this is from the National Young Farmers Coalition, and I had thought about trying to increase the eligibility within the FSA loans. It says that in 2017, the National Young Farmers Coalition conducted a survey, and 15% of young farmers did report using FSA farm ownership loans, yet barriers in outreach, eligibility, and program execution still keep many young and BIPOC farmers at an arm's reach from the federal funds that help create viable land tenure. So some are definitely still using FSA loans, but a wide majority are still left out of that. And so I think looking at, right, that's a federal program. So how do we reshape that program to make it more accessible for those folks who are looking to enter into it is really what I'm trying to do.
I understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Could be difficult.
I love it, Rodney.
I mean, you can't, you know, if somebody drives up here from New York City, takes off his suit, says, I want to be a farmer, never been around an animal in their life, you're not gonna get anybody that's gonna fund that. See what I'm saying?
I don't want that either.
That's why I'm kind of
Yeah.
interested in the idea of tying it to having been a farm worker,
yeah.
you know, because
Well, a farm worker's got the experience.
Right. Was
Yeah.
previously been engaged in the act of farming as defined by 10 VSA 6001 or, yeah, totally.
So you could tighten up the definition a little bit right there to, I mean, I think you're right, nobody's gonna want to fund that, but so let's be clear about that in the
Yes.
language and say, no, it's not anybody who has less than 3 years, but actually we want a little more than less than 3 years.
Right. Right.
John?
Or they don't need help, right? It's the venture capitalists who wants to go into crocuses, like that, they don't really need to be prioritized.
really attacking the crocus.
Well, I just know, yeah, saffron, right? But I was thinking, that example we heard about the house with the peeling paint.
Right.
If the actual applicant for the loan was then the HCB or Ag Bank or something, somebody who's good for their money,
Right.
who could have somewhat less, higher standards, we'll call them, then they could be the gap between that potential new farmer and NRCS, say, loan programs.
Right.
Would be great.
John, just remind us what that illustration was, that
It
we
was-
feel in the paint.
Who was the woman, Jack?
Jack.
Thomas or something?
She was over at my house for lunch this weekend.
Oh, really? Yeah.
The
Oh,
small
yeah.
farm action days with
Right,
Vermont's, like,
And, but just what was the situation that the loan
Her husband
application?
had found the right farm.
Yeah.
But because the house had issues, maybe it was the thought of lead paint or it was just disheveled, they somehow were not considered a good risk to loan money to.
So if somebody had just taken off that paint, put on a new coat of paint, it would have qualified.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's my recollection, yeah.
So that as a stopgap measure, perhaps, is that the suggestion?
Maybe, yeah. I'm not sure if that's what you were getting at, John, but
Well, I'm saying, if there was a Vermont, bank or VHCB existing one who could step in and say, fine, we'll buy this from the old farmer, the decaying house, and then become the mortgage holder, that the new farmer would eventually pay off that mortgage. So you don't have to jump through all those federal hoops. As we've seen, Vermont can have, more reasonable
right.
requirements than the federal government.
All right, well, good. I think we've got some thoughts there and some things that we can do before we pick this up again. We're done for the day. I think what I'm gonna ask tomorrow is that we plan on 9:30. And right now, we don't have anybody on the agenda for 9:30, but we may work somebody in later today. So 9:30 anyway, and we'll have some open discussion on other things if we get somebody actually in.
Keep thinking about what we might want to do as a cabaret thing, although if we haven't signed up for a slot, I'm not sure there are any, I'll talk to Taylor
Okay,
and see if there are any available, but it'd be nice if we did something ag, but we could just kick some ideas around and,
yeah, right, we could do that.
Yeah, we just try a couple
Yeah.
things up. I don't think it's not rocket science. I just need help. So
We can also do that offline, so if,
that is very true.
yeah, share an idea with